Hey guys, so this video today actually comes to you by request. A dear friend of mine got in contact and said she always found this topic of confirmation bias really interesting. And so I was tossing it around in my head, and being that I have so much to say on it, I asked her about what angle she had in mind particularly. I mean, you could take it in many directions, couldn't you? We could use how the Jehovah's Witnesses twist current events to suggest we're in the last days, or how we're admonished as believers to table our doubts and be loyal, or how they manipulate field service stats and so on. Then she forwarded this incredible interview with a former Watchtower writer and researcher on the ExJW 5th channel. That forum is awesome, by the way, guys. Big shout out to Cliff. He's a terrific guy doing some remarkable work. So my friend said, I was intrigued by some of the info in this interview. Basically, take a topic, have a preconceived notion of what is truth, in capital letters, and then only search for the things that support your point of view. She continues, it's not just JWs. I mean, we all do it to a degree. I just find the topic fascinating. So I don't want to reveal this person's identity, but you know who you are, and thank you so much for such a great video idea. This person actually woke up long before I did, and I would say was one of the perfect examples of how to treat those in the faith who may be dealing with cognitive dissonance or in a state of transition. If you ever want to develop that theme or tell your story, I'd love to be a part of it. But in the meantime, I suppose my infinite respect and admiration will have to do. Anyway, back to confirmation bias. This is actually something that was central to my coming to the law of attraction as a philosophy, which is the focus of my channel. It deeply bothered me for years as a witness, how I was supposed to retain my personal religious views, knowing that the world was so complicated, and how given a specific context or perspective, you could pretty well make a case for anything. How can an ultimate and absolute truth in capital letters, such as my friend would put it, emerge from such a paradox? It troubled me for a lot of years. Are we just supposed to choose the ideologies that will be used to orient our lives, such as you would in selecting an entree off a menu, say, and doggedly stand behind it till death? She's accurate in saying that it's not a problem specific to the witnesses, despite the fact that they may be worse for that sort of thing than most. In today's video, we're going to talk about what confirmation bias really is, how to escape it when it becomes truly harmful, but I'm actually going to show where confirmation bias can even be used positively. Now that last sentence seems like such a counterintuitive thing to say. How can confirmation bias be anything but negative? Trust me, I understand that reaction, but I'll come to it later, okay? The answer may surprise you. Stick around. Hey good people, I'm Derek London. Thanks for checking out my channel. Around here we talk about everything law of attraction. We discuss a lot about the psychological, scientific, and rational basis for subscribing to this philosophy of mine. And in fact, if your reality could stand some change for the better, you have only to start there, with your mind. Hit that subscribe button and settle in, because your life will never be the same. Hey folks, thanks so much as usual for stopping by. Let's get right into it. What is a confirmation bias? My friend mentioned earlier pretty well defined it verbatim. Take a topic, have a preconceived notion of what is truth, and then only search for evidence that supports your point of view. I can't improve on that definition. But let me expand on it. Interestingly, confirmation bias is a psychological term. Here's what the Encyclopedia Britannica says about it. Confirmation bias, the tendency to process information by looking for or interpreting information that is consistent with one's existing beliefs. This biased approach to decision-making is largely unintentional and often results in ignoring inconsistent information. Existing beliefs can include one's expectations in a given situation and predictions about a particular outcome. People are especially likely to process information to support their own beliefs when the issue is highly important or self-relevant. Then it offers some background. It continues. Confirmation bias is one example of how humans sometimes process information in an illogical, biased manner. Many factors of which people are unaware can influence information processing. Philosophers note that humans have difficulty processing information in a rational, unbiased manner once they have developed an opinion upon the issue. Humans are better able to rationally process information, giving equal weight to multiple viewpoints if they are emotionally distant from the issue, although a low level of confirmation bias can still occur when an individual has no vested interests." End quote. Okay, already we've hit several snags. I'm purposely going to be difficult here for a moment, so follow my rationale. I'm coming to something. Let's talk about proximity for a moment. Britannica says that we're better able to process information if we're emotionally distant. Well, of course, that initially seems reasonable, doesn't it? We all know how emotion can cloud our judgment. But there's also a very common sense in which that is completely untrue. How so? Well, because any decision can be interpreted as an expression of one's emotional proclivities and wish fulfillment. But this totally misses the fact that very often people become emotionally invested in certain propositions because they find the data they've looked at so overwhelmingly compelling. So you end up in the chicken versus egg problem, don't you? Are people invested emotionally prior to examining the evidence? Or are they entrenched because of the evidence they've seen? Any witness and ex-witness will tell you they are convinced on the basis of the evidence and will wholeheartedly believe that to be true as they say it. I've been on both sides of that divide, so I'm speaking from experience here. But there's another implication that doesn't sit well with me about this argument from emotion. Again, I'm purposely being difficult, just indulge me, okay? If we are better able to process information based on our emotional distance, then what do you call an expert or a professional? Is this not someone who is so emotionally invested that he's dedicated his entire life to that craft? You won't find any more intimately emotional about a subject than a professional. And yet we entrust the most important of jobs to experts, don't we? There's even an old aphorism that goes something like that: never jest with the tradespeople, because they take it so seriously. Indeed, isn't it the ones that have been victims of having family or friends murdered who make the most effective criminal prosecutors? Aren't it the most compassionate doctors who make for the best surgeons? Isn't it the expert witness in a trial who will present data which often tips the verdict in a specific direction? Haven't we discovered during the Australian Royal Commission inquiry into the Jehovah's Witnesses that reveals it is precisely the emotional distance of aloof, senile men in Warwick toward child sexual abuse that is responsible for most of their backward policies? Now, as I've said, of course emotional proximity can cloud our judgment. We know that. But how can we be sure we haven't made all of our decisions on a principle of emotional bias, except in the fact that we choose things? That question is actually worth restating. How can I be sure that I haven't made all of my decisions on a principle of emotional bias, except in the fact that I choose things? Get out of that riddle if you can. So that answers part of my second question. How do you escape the confirmation bias? The answer is, you technically can't. You're saturated in it, my friend, and so am I. In fact, I've even committed this bias in my choice of reference. Why the hell did I choose to quote the Encyclopedia Britannica in the first place? When I Googled the term confirmation bias, here's what showed up and what my reactions were. As usual, top of the list is Wikipedia. Hell no, I ain't quoting them. Wikipedia has been great for certain things, but the editors have been caught red-handed vandalizing many scientists' reputations and topics. See my video on depression if you want to go down that rabbit hole. It'll be linked in the description below. Let's see who's next. Psychology Today, they're all right. I've referenced them before, but they've shown their cards too obviously as well sometimes. Who else? Verywellmind.com. I have no opinion on them. But the article title is not really definitional. It's called Examples and Observations of a Confirmation Bias. Pass. Britannica.com. Even the witnesses quote them, so I can't be accused of using spurious sources. See how even in defining the topic, I'm guilty of revealing my bias. If you're an honest person, I think you see the problem. But let's even go further back than that. Let's just take our definition. Confirmation bias, the tendency to process information by looking for or interpreting information that is consistent with one's existing beliefs. Well, it's safe to say that unless my channel's focus was philosophy, and unless I came from the witness background I did, I wouldn't even be commenting on the matter of bias today, would I? So isn't the choice of my topic today not in itself also a reflection of my personal beliefs? Of course it is. Otherwise, why would it even be something of note to me? So simply by choosing to comment on this, as opposed to the infinite number of things I could have, am I not a victim of the very thing I hope to condemn in this video? At a certain point, we all need to appreciate that to speak on any matter from an interested or concerned angle, it's not just corrupt, unfair, or a dishonest thing to do. Pronouncing upon anything from an invested direction is the very content of speech. It's an expression of confirmation bias. Because how am I supposed to observe or report on the world unless I take up a relative position toward it? I'm not sure there are any statements you or I can make which would be true under all circumstances and independent of our point of reference. So short of that, I believe the only consistent thing I can say is that truth is perspectival and contextual to the very core. Perhaps that is the only universal truth there is. I don't know. It certainly seems that way to me. But again, what is me aside from a locus of observation and interest? So you can understand my friend's fascination with this issue, can't you? It takes someone who's thought about things deeply to even recognize the paradox. I did a real deep dive into this matter not long ago in a video entitled Jehovah's Witnesses, What is Truth? It'll be linked below in the description and in the end screen. Okay, so what does this mean though? Surely we shouldn't just choose our beliefs like an entree off a menu. Surely not all quote-unquote truths are equal. Undoubtedly, there are more and less respectable efforts one can take to compensate for their initial prejudices. Isn't there value in that? Well, of course there is. Being that truth is contextual, it's infinitely valuable to take in knowledge and learn where your blind spots are. A large dose of self-doubt is healthy. One of my favorite authors wrote the following words: "We make our first judgments rapidly, and we are dreadful at seeking out evidence that might disconfirm those initial judgments." The march of scientific inquiry, philosophical questioning, and research has done nothing but enrich humanity beyond belief. How sad it is when our ignorance results in unnecessary death, conflict, and strife. I think the governing body is decidedly an extreme illustration for that. Truth is contextual. It's possible, common in fact, for something to be true in one case, but false in another. Our entire legal system is predicated upon very tedious, at times even hair-splitting distinctions. Because clearly you can't paint every situation with the same brush. That's what's wrong with the governing body's inflexible approach to the world. Everything that happens fits perfectly within their narrative, you see? When Russia bans them, it's a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. When their evangelism increases, it fulfills Matthew 24:14. When it stagnates, that too fulfills Matthew 24:14 and shows how the Great Tribulation is nigh. When the Catholics are scandalized by child abuse cover-ups, that fulfills Revelation 18 verse 2 regarding Babylon the Great, doesn't it? But when the witnesses are hauled up on the mat, it's Matthew 5 verse 11. Blessed are you when others revile you. When other religions change their doctrines, It's ear-tickling and compromising God's word. When witnesses do it, it's humility and the light getting brighter. When good things happen, your house sells or you get a promotion, God's blessing you and increasing your livestock like Abraham to advance his purposes. When you get sick or tragedy befalls you, it's a thorn in the flesh, or God is finishing your training. He will make you firm. He will make you strong. 1 Peter 5 verse 10. Let's be absolutely clear. Not all biases are alike. Some are far more shameless than others. And some witnesses will never learn. They'll never see it. They're too entrenched. Having opinions about things doesn't mean you have to commit to an entire ideology. Honestly and meticulously working through your biases doesn't make you inconsistent or a flip-flop. It's rather a sign of maturity, subtlety, and nuance. That video my friend shared from ExJW 5th channel was an excellent example of that. The brother from the writing department, Ben was his name, seemed so knowledgeable and fair-minded in his critique of the witnesses. He spoke of his experience as a researcher and writer for the branch. He spoke about how he would pitch articles to the society and they'd accept or reject them. It was an interesting experience to hear from someone. I've noticed how many journalists feel tortured in their noble profession to present facts that aren't tainted by their views. Now, I've already shown how that is technically impossible. But it takes serious honesty and cojones to just recognize it. It's noteworthy, too, when Ben left, that he wasn't consumed with rage over the injustices and corruptions he experienced. Resisting confirmation bias doesn't mean you have to abandon everything you once believed. It's kind of like this. When you become aware of your biases, they tend to disappear. As I mentioned earlier, bias is merely a trajectory of observation. It's a vantage point. So when you're aware of your angle, it's no longer a compromise to adopt another one for a closer or more appropriate view. If you look at me under an X-ray or a microscope, you're going to see different things, aren't you? But you're still examining the same subject. So a good question to ask in studying your biases is, what potential harm is there in holding rigidly to my beliefs under every circumstance? Simply by posing that question, you are confronting your biases. So if you're even disposed to doing that, you're already 90% the way there. Awareness is the solution. Okay, now this leads me to my last point about where confirmation biases can even be used positively, which at first sounds utterly preposterous, doesn't it? But let's look at that definition again. Confirmation bias, the tendency to process information by looking for or interpreting information that is consistent with one's existing beliefs. See what's involved there? A confirmation bias is starting from the conclusion and working backwards. Well, where the hell have we heard that before? Start from the conclusion and work backward. Jesus, isn't that the definition of a goal? Let's say you want to buy a house or a car or relocate or manifest anything. What do? You sit down and you write out what kind of person who is in possession of a desired thing would have, and you create a checklist for yourself. You start from the end result and you work backwards. As you move down and mark off the list, guess what? You are literally becoming the person who would own such things. Goal pursuit or manifestation is the very essence of confirmation bias. You ever notice how inventors and visionaries have always been spoken of in mystical terms? Listen to how people speak of Newton, Edison, Einstein, Tesla, and Musk. They're only working with the laws of nature, but they've hacked reality, and they've achieved a class of priesthood in doing so. What about illusionists? Same thing. You ever heard how magicians create an illusion? They start from the conclusion and work backwards. They become devoted to their confirmation bias. They see reality through that bias. Realize that there is no difference between science and divination, technology and miracles, goal pursuit and premonition. But the key component here is that these are birthed from a place of knowledge and information. Religious fundamentalism tries to mimic these true specialties, but is ultimately grounded in ignorance. All of these terms are synonymous with each other. There's no competition between these ideas. I think you can see how appropriate to the law of attraction this concept is. This is how you become a conscious creator of your life. When you're ruled by your biases, you're a slave to fate. When you control your biases, you become the architect of your reality. Now, we're obviously aware of how holding fast to beliefs that are demonstrably false can create a lot of damage. I'd never recommend it. But there is this interpretive framework through which you can create and constitute reality to your choosing. This is what the law of attraction is all about. It's not to be confused with superstitious nonsense. There's a fine line that separates science and mysticism, because from outward appearances, they look identical. I like how Joe Dispenza puts it. He says that science is the modern language of mysticism. But the genuine discipline of manifestation is profoundly different. Confirmation bias isn't a bad thing when you know how to use it. Tell me what you think of that below in the comments. Hope this helped. Let me know if I can expand on anything, and we'll see you in the next one. This is Derek London. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, did you like this video? You know what to do. And if something I mentioned today resonated with you, click one of them cards on this screen. I have lots of related content sure to interest you. Thanks as always for your views, and we'll see you next time.